Welcome to our very first Alaska wildlife presentation. My name is Laura.
And I am Bill. Welcome.
And we are so excited to share each and every day a different animal, a different creature or creatures that roam the wilderness of Alaska. Today is a great one too.
Absolutely.
It's a doozy. We are both Alaska naturalists. We are certified through the University of Alaska Southeast. Very proud of that and excited to share with you this great information.
Today we're going to start with probably one of the big stars of the show when it comes to wildlife in Alaska, and that's the whales, which are abundant in Alaska's waters throughout the cruising season. Whales are cetaceans, and all that means is that they are mammals, all right? These are mammals. Alaska whales breathe air into their lungs. They are warm-blooded creatures. They breastfeed their young, and they have some, although usually very little, hair. They're divided into two classifications depending on what's going on in their mouth. This is a whale's mouth with baleen, all right? Baleen is kind of like a keratin type, like your fingernail substance that makes a netting in their mouth. The other types of whales have teeth. They are toothed whales.
Tooth. They have tooths.
That's truth. And that's the truth about the tooth. And they have a cylindrical body, to me kind of like an airplane fuselage. And they've got those forelimbs. They're also known as flippers that give them guidance and propulsion along the way, mainly for steering. Most of their propulsion comes from at the very end of the tail. The tail holds the fluke, it's called, or two tail fins, a divided tail fin. And that can move vertically and create an enormous amount of thrust to move them through the water over long distances. It can even provide enough thrust to hurl them out of the water, what we call a breach. Absolutely awe-inspiring to get to see that. Now, I looked it up. Alaska Fish and Wildlife Department reports that all along the coast of Alaska, from the far north down through southeast, there are 14 different types of whales. I'll list them off for you. Baird's beaked, the belugas, the blue, the bowhead, the cuvier's beak, the fin, the gray, the humpback, the orca, sometimes known as the killer, the minke, North Pacific right, the sei, the sperm, the Steininger's beaked whale. All of these whales living in different regions at different times throughout Alaska's waters. Now, obviously, we're not going to have enough time today to cover all of those. We're going to dig in a little deeper on a couple of the most common types of whales that we see in Southeast Alaska on the cruise region. But I want you to know, I love studying whales because each and every one is really unique and really fascinating.
For instance, did you know that a sperm whale can stay underwater for up to 2 hours on one single breath?
Golly.
Yeah.
That's a long breath. Belugas are another of my favorites. At about age 6, they turn completely white, just stunning to see. And these are the deep divers. They can go almost 3,000 feet deep as they dive. They do generally travel in small pods, but they have been recorded in pods, a group of traveling together as a pod, over 100, even 1,000 white whales traveling together. What a sight.
That would be amazing.
Man.
The gray whale is the only baleen whale that is mainly a bottom feeder, and they migrate 5,000 to 7,000 miles each way.
Man.
Every year.
From the northern part of Alaska clear down to California's Baja Peninsula, one way.
Wow.
5,000 to 7,000. That's a long commute, that's for sure. The next one I think is fascinating is the bowhead. Look at the size of the head on this thing. Immense. 1/3 of the bowhead's total body length is his head. His mouth can be 16 feet long. His tongue can weigh up to a ton. They are capable with that big head of breaking the ice in the Arctic region to get up and get a breath. 8 inches, a foot, sometimes up to 2 feet. They can break that ice and get up there, get a breath. They also are considered to be one of the longest living animals on Earth and can live for well over 100 years.
Well, it's because they got such a giant head.
Yeah, that's true.
A big head, and they're not going to let themselves die.
That's right. But they're not the biggest whale.
No, the biggest, the granddaddy of them all, and the largest animal on Earth ever.
That's right.
Ever is the blue whale. The blue whale is 100 feet long and weighs up to 150 tons. That's as large as a Boeing jet. Its heart is as large as a small car. 50 people could stand on its tongue.
Wow.
Where did we get this information?
That's a party.
And its spout shoots up at least 30 feet in the air when it surfaces. I mean, can you imagine seeing one of these grand, amazing creatures in the wild? I can't even.
Can't even imagine. What I can imagine seeing are humpbacks. And all along our cruise, we see lots of humpbacks for the most part. You never can guarantee whales, but they are abundant in Alaska's waters. They've come to feed during the summertime. Humpbacks are known for that rounded, humped dorsal fin there on their back. You can see very easily. Makes them easy to spot on the water. That's another nice thing about it. They're very active. They can really leap and jump up out of the water and breach. Can be very active. Adult females about 50 feet. So almost a 5-story building length of this animal. Males just a little shorter at about 45 feet. They can weigh up to 65 tons. I looked up for an equivalent. It said about 3 school buses. 3 school buses is about the weight of one of these humpbacks. They do have those really large flippers you can see here in the picture. And that's a real distinguishing feature of these. They can be 15, 16 feet long, just a flipper. Their population is doing a lot better. In the 1870s, it was estimated that worldwide there was about 125,000 humpbacks. But because of whaling, by the early 1900s, whaling had reduced that population down below 5,000 animals left on Earth. Thankfully, in 1946, some international regulations were agreed upon. Humpbacks in Alaska now number around 20,000 worldwide, up to about 80,000. We're seeing maybe like a 5% increase in the population each year. So very encouraging to see what's going on with the humpbacks. They also are a long liver. Average usually about 50 years, but they have been recorded to live up to 95 years. So another long lifespan here. They're seen in all of the world's oceans. They migrate annually from the tropics to the polar regions each and every summer and winter. They'll move to a different part of the world for feeding or for breeding. Speaking of which, they have their offspring. The females will give birth to 1 offspring every 2 to 3 years. They mate during the winter migration as they're headed down towards Hawaii, towards warmer waters. And 11 to 12 months later, they will give birth to a single calf weighing about 2 tons and measuring up to 13 feet long.
I think that the humpbacks have really figured it out.
Why is that?
Because they winter in Hawaii and they summer in Alaska.
You talk about a smart animal.
That is a smart animal.
They do have it figured out, that's for sure. These are baleen whales, the humpbacks. They have baleen instead of teeth. They take in a mouthful of giant water, a school of fish, whatever they can get, and then they'll use that netting as they close their mouth. With their tongue, they'll push all the water, silt, sediment, whatever else out and hold back behind that baleen the food. They're looking for shrimp, krill, plankton, small fish. Their throat is only about the size of a grapefruit, so they can't swallow really giant, big animals. They're eating lots and lots of little fish, herring, mackerel, 2,000 to 9,000 pounds a day they are consuming. They also have a very interesting feeding habit known as bubble net feeding. We'll talk about this a little more on the cruising day later in our trip. But to give you kind of a highlight, these are smart animals. They sing, they communicate to each other with these lovely sounds. They'll work as a team to hunt. When they find a school of fish, they'll signal to each other and swim below the fish in a great big circle and exhale bubbles to create a bubble net, like a tubular net of bubbles that holds the fish in and confuse them. Then on a signal, they'll swim up through the middle of that tube with their mouths open and just get as much fish as they possibly can. In doing so, these animals, sometimes a dozen or more at a time, will breach or bob at least out of the water as they reach the surface. We've had a chance to see this on several occasions.
It is unbelievable. It's so amazing to see bubble net feeding.
I've ended up almost in tears at the incredible beauty of witnessing that.
Yes.
So bubble net feeding is an interesting part of their lifespan. They are not to be confused, though, with the other most common type of whale.
Now, the other most common type of whale would be the orca, the killer whale. I don't like to call them that, though.
That's right.
They get a bad rap as far as I'm concerned.
Everybody's eating somebody else.
That's right. But these are the two that you're going to have the best chance to see. So let's do a quick little comparison on what you would be looking for when you're whale watching. What animal are you looking at?
Yeah.
The main thing, well, first of all, the size is a big difference because the humpback is much larger than the orca. I mean, we talked about the size of the humpback already, 50 feet long and up to 60 tons or more. And the orca is only 20 feet long and only up to about 10 tons. But if you don't have them right next to each other, that's not really going to be the best way for you to figure it out, right? So you're going to watch for the dorsal fin, the back side of the animal, which comes up as they're going along when they come up to breathe. And of course, the humpback has a hump on its back.
Yeah.
They did not get very clever with this name here. So you're going to be looking for that. It's not a very tall dorsal fin, but it's nice and rounded and humped as they make that
surfacing.
Surfacing.
Sure.
Thank you. There's the word. Whereas the orca have the really tall, black, pointed dorsal fin. So that's really the very best way to do it. You look for that back as they're surfacing. You look whether it's a hump or whether it's a really tall, black, pointed dorsal fin. Also, just the markings on the orcas make them so unique because it's like Shamu or Free Willy, right? You look for that dark black color with the white markings on it, whereas the humpbacks are more of sort of a grayish color with no additional markings or colors to them. So let's talk about the orcas now. Yep. The orcas are found in all the oceans of the world. Their population is really kind of unknown, but there's probably about 50,000 of them, they think. The size, so the male orcas can get to about 23 feet long, while the females top out at about 21 feet. The weight of the males is 7 to 10 tons. The females a little bit smaller, 4 to 6 tons. They feed on fish, squid, birds, and marine mammals, like little baby seals and things. This is the stuff I don't like to watch on the Nature Channel.
Circle of Life can be heartbreaking.
It can be heartbreaking when you see that part of the circle of life. But, everybody's got to eat, like you said. Right. They use, like dolphins, they use echolocation, bouncing sound off of objects underwater to determine where they are, to hunt. They use a series of high-pitched clicks to stun their prey. The pods work together. It's a very social animal, and pods, as Bill says, is a group of whales that pretty much stick together most of the time. So they'll work together to catch a meal. They don't bubble net feed like the humpbacks, but they might do things like force the fish into one area and take turns feeding. Sometimes they beach themselves to scare the seals into the water over by where the other orcas are waiting to feed on them. Pretty clever they are, very smart. And they are among the fastest marine mammals in the world. They can swim in excess of 35 miles per hour. So we're always telling people when you see one go under the water, you got to keep scanning and looking all around the ship for them again, because they can get from one spot to the other side of the ship in a very short amount of time. You never know where they're going to pop up again. They are highly social. They travel in pods of anywhere from 5 animals to 30 animals, although some pods will combine at times, and you'll find as many as 100 animals all together. Man. That would be an amazing sight to see.
And remember, some pods stay in one general area. They call those residents.
That's right.
And then there are transients that move over a large span of distance.
And that's why it is hard for them to determine exactly how many orcas there are in the world. It's because of the transient versus the resident pods. The pods are led by females. Girl power to the orcas.
Gotta agree with that.
And they are thought to have a very complex form of communication. They make different sounds. They almost call them like dialects or almost different languages from one pod to the other. So the researchers, the scientists that listen to the sounds that they make can actually determine which pod they're listening to based on that dialect from the pod. When it comes to reproduction, the orca's gestation period is 13 to 16 months. The little babies are born in the autumn. Little babies weighing almost 400 pounds.
Wow.
Measuring up to 7 feet long when they're born. And a calf will remain with its mother for at least 2 years. We love to see the little babies. Every year we'll catch a pod where you'll see various ages. In fact, some of the juveniles you'll see, and then you'll realize that you might even be seeing a mother and a calf that's all grown up, because some of the calves never leave their moms.
It's a good family unit.
They're good kids.
As long as the food keeps coming in,
That's right. Work together. The lifespan of an orca in the wild is anywhere from 30 to 50 years. So, I know we all can't wait to get up to Alaska and actually see these amazing animals again. So tell them a little bit about what to do when you're whale watching.
We just thought we'd pass along a couple of tips. The whales surface and breathe, and so they'll exhale and blow out any water in that hole that they breathe through, their blowhole, and then they'll take in their breath of water. So that is very visible. That exhale of mist becomes a great thing to kind of scan for on the horizon, catch your attention, really pull you in there. So always watch for the blow.
And then the fun part too is when they go to make a long, deep dive is when that tail comes up out of the water. And if they're working together in a pod, or if they're traveling together in a pod and there's multiple animals, it's so fun to watch tail after tail after tail go up. So that's something that is a photo opportunity for sure.
Couple other behavior things that are interesting. They're curious creatures. Sometimes when tourist boats are around, they'll bob up out of the water, what we call spy hopping. Mm-hmm. They'll spy up out of the water, and they seem to be examining them. There's also a theory that they may be on occasion looking for landmarks along the coastline that guides them on their path. Really smart animals. They'll sometimes lay over on their side and flap their fins at you and splash. Really curious social animals that make them a lot of fun to watch. Although I think when they come out of the water is the biggest attraction.
Oh, yes. And that is called breaching. I think Bill mentioned that earlier. And that really is what you're watching for, right? You want to see the animal come all the way up out of the water. To think that this animal that weighs as much as 3 school buses can launch itself completely out of the water, it's mind-boggling, and it's an amazing sight to behold. We're not really sure why they breach. No one's really figured it out. They think perhaps they have an itch.
Yeah, the barnacles attaching to their sides. I read that once. Jump up and splash those barnacles off.
Try to knock them off. I just think they do it because they can.
It's just fun.
Wouldn't you, if you could? So I think it's playful. It could be another reason, but it is a sight to behold.
And it seems like the further out of the water they come, the more amazing it is. Oh. So what a sight to see. I want to introduce you to John Muir. John Muir is a naturalist that came to Alaska just after the purchase of Alaska by the United States. Wrote prolifically about it, inspired so many people, even still today, to come and support the Alaska tourism trade. Fascinating guy. I have a whole lecture coming up for him later in the week, but he wrote a nice passage about whales I thought I would share with you. And yonder, glistening amid the irised spray, 6 whales, their broad backs like glaciated bosses of granite, heaving aloft in near view, spouting lustily, drawing a long breath, and plunging down home in colossal health and comfort. Think of the hearts of these whales, beating warm against the sea day and night, through dark and light, on and on, how the red blood must rush and gurgle in and out, bucketfuls, barrelfuls at a beat. Wow. He could write.
We'll be sharing much more John Muir with you as the cruise goes along. And thank you so much for joining us for our first Alaska Wildlife presentation on whales. We will be talking to you again very, very soon.
Have a great day.